Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Peel. Now here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. Chaotic protests against immigration raids in Los Angeles has entered its fourth day, with the U.S. President Donald Trump deploying thousands of troops. The protests are now spreading to other cities in the U.S., such as New York, Philadelphia, Dallas, Austin, and San Francisco. Some 700 U.S. Marines have been deployed to LA area, and the contingent of National Guard troops mobilized to help quell the disorder has been doubled to 4,000. California Governor Gavin Newsom said the move was fulfilling what he called Trump's enraged, or rather deranged, fantasy of a dictatorial president. Meanwhile, the President Trump has defended his decision to deploy the National Guard in California during a press conference at the White House. He called the situation in parts of Los Angeles an insurrection and blaming paid troublemakers for the unrest. He also criticized state governors and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, saying disaster's response should return to state control. Now, the World Bank has lowered its projection for global GDP growth to 2.3% in its latest economic prospects report. According to the bank's group chief economist, Indamit Gill, the projection is weakest expected performance in 17 years, outside of outright global recession. While noting that global growth and inflation prospects for this year and next have worsened owing to policy and trade relations, Gill warned that if a swift course correction is not implemented, the harm to global living standards could deepen. And for more insight on this, I'm joined by Global Affairs Analyst Ejike Okpa. Ejike, you're welcome. Once again, thank you. Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Grand. So, Ejike, World Bank has lowered its growth forecast for global GDP growth to 2.3% in its latest economic prospect report. What is your assessment of this projection?
You know, as much as I respect what the World Bank does, for those of us that live in the U.S., we don't pay attention to the World Bank. Our Congress and state governments don't go in and say, hey, look at what the World Bank is saying. You know, yes, America is part of the world, but we are a world of our own. So I don't know what, who is going to get excited about this stuff. But some people do, and obviously we are going to see, what the forecast is at the end of the year, whatever the period they are reporting on. We're going to see whether their prediction is what happens. But World Bank is just that unfortunate institution that after the World War ended, it was an institution that was specifically set up to help Western Europe rebuild after the World War II. But since that has been done, they have somehow, by default, become this institution that think they're going to tell the world what to do. And for the 100 and so countries that still go to them for something, maybe they are relevant. But as far as I'm concerned, and as far as America is concerned, we don't pay attention to the world.
So, Ejike, not disregarding your perception of the World Bank, but that aside, the World Bank Group Chief Economist Indamit Gill, he blamed the downward review to Trump's tariff wars. Do you see the United States shortchanging itself as other economies champion alliance that could undermine U.S. economy?
Well, again, I'm not defending Trump. I'm not defending anything like that. But it's just like, you look at the World Bank and the World Economic Forum that happens in Davos. What do you think? These are the globalists. These are institutions that think that they are going to be the ones that dictate. Every country has the right to see what it is going to work for them. And in terms of trade, you're going to have to also strive to trade with a country on a bilateral level or multilateral level in order for you not to be a dumping ground. While the World Bank is saying that, a report from our Commerce Department, he said the American trade deficit is narrowing because Americans are restricted import, and now they are doing export. So is the World Bank? I don't know whether the World Bank may look at that to make their own prediction. But like I said, the World Bank has never testified in U.S. Congress. We don't make a reference to what the World Bank says. So for the unfortunate countries that still rely on them for their forecast and whatever it is, tell me what country, since the World Bank assumed this default role, that has emerged successful because of what they said. Tell me country. Is it in Africa, where they go around and even try to be, the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Finance and Commerce? When Jonathan was there, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who was a former World Bank employee, even had an office of the World Bank in Aso Rock. Just think about that. Has the World Bank ever made reference to any Nigerian statistical data on Nigerian growth? Has they ever quoted the University of Lagos or Nsukka or anybody say, hey, this is what Nigeria is saying? It's always the World Bank. So it goes to tell you that when you surrender your own responsibility, somebody other than yourself is going to come in there and become this alpha and omega. So I'm just saying, if you want to pay attention to the World Bank, knock yourself out.
Okay.
Sorry.
But while the U.S. might be immune to this, I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. How does it affect other nationals, or rather other nations? How does it affect Africa, for instance? How does it affect Nigeria?
Well, it will affect Nigeria because Nigeria obviously hasn't developed its own internal resources to say this is what we're going to see in our growth and this is how we're going to go about it, and then put that in comparison to what the World Bank is saying or the IMF. So what my saying is that when you make yourself a doormat, which is the case in most emerging countries or economies, they now go to the World Bank to see and listen to them as to what they do. Canada is not going to pay attention to the World Bank. A lot of the South American, Central American countries. It's only Africa and some other unfortunate tiny countries in the Caribbean and Southeast Asia. China is not going to pay attention to this. Japan is not paying attention. UK, the European Union are not paying attention to this. But, somehow they're going to have to assert their own relevance by saying what they say. And some people, they look at it, some people ignore it. I'm just saying, develop your own domestic resources, develop your own experts. Let them be the ones that step forward and say, this is what's going on in our country. If the World Bank prediction aligns with them, so be it, but should not be the report anybody's going to look at and start to panic or dance.
Now, there is a big shakeup because of those tariffs, and I'm wondering whether your position is that Africa, Nigeria, doesn't need to panic.
Well, because first, what is Nigeria selling to the world? I mean, since Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala became, Secretary General of Trade, World Trade Organization, how much trade has Nigeria done? We get excited about Nigerians that are in some of these organizations. The point is, those people are job seekers. They are desk jobbers. They have nothing to do. So Nigeria will panic because Nigeria doesn't produce anything apart from oil that they sell to the world. What else do Nigeria produce? I mean, you look at the revenue stream to Nigeria, 70% of the federal budget is anchored on oil and gas. So that tells you Nigerians who are only producing about 30% to fund their own living. By now, oil should have been the other way, 15 or 10 or less percent, while the Nigerian productivity, in agriculture, manufacturing, and other services would have been earning more money to the federal government. Okay. So they're going to panic because, they have nothing else to do than natural resources.
Then, Ejike, let's use the rest of the time, and I'm hoping you can be summary in your response now. Let's talk about LA and the LA immigration protest that's been happening. 4,000 deployed military forces, 700 Marines. What's your take on what's happening in Los Angeles?
Well, it's very unfortunate. I mean, we live in a polarized partisan political thing. It's the blue versus the red, and the red versus the blue, and the independents, get crushed in between. But let me just give you some historical perspective. In 1957, when the desegregation of schools was being passed as a law, the Supreme Court has said, the schools have to be desegregated. The state of Alabama, Arkansas said no, and the president at the time, Eisenhower, had to send federal troops to allow 9 black kids to go to school. So that is 68 years ago. And then you come to 1965, LBJ had to do the same thing, when Alabama Governor George Wallace also refused people to march, civil rights march in Selma, Alabama. And then you come to 1968, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, the same thing happened. But the most recent, before Trump 2025 case, is 1992 when Rodney King, a black guy was being beat up, by LA police, and there was a riot. The governor of California at the time, reached out to the president and said, hey, send me some troops to, to sort of control this riot. So that was 1992, and it was George Bush Sr. who was there. So Trump is not doing what other president has done. America oftentimes gets to be so tense because, when it comes to immigration, there's always this tension because, people get emotional about it. Why are we treating people the way they are? But I always ask the question. You don't reward illegal conduct with legal response. You have to, when people break into your country, you're going to have to make a decision on what you want them to do, on how you want them to be. I mean, Nigeria did it. Nigeria kicked out Ghana, which led to Ghana must go in the 80s. So we shouldn't be the one, Nigeria shouldn't be the one raising finger about immigration issue because they have done it to their fellow African country. So what needs to happen is for nations to develop sensible immigration laws and make it clear, don't violate our laws. At the time, immigration was come one, come all, but now nations have come up with laws to say, this is how you enter, this is how you're going to legalize your stay, this is the duration of your stay. Anybody who is violating that is not looking at your country with respect.
All right, then.
So for me...
All right, then, Ejike. My apologies, didn't mean to cut you short there, but we do have very little time. But thank you very much, Ejike, once again for joining us this evening.
Having me.
Grand. Now we'll take a short break. And when we return, more from Beyond the Continent. Austrian Chancellor Christian Stocker has declared 3 days of national mourning after a school shooting in the southeastern city of Graz. The attack, reportedly carried out by a 21-year-old former student of the school, left 10 people dead and several others seriously injured. The suspected shooter, who police believe killed himself in a school bathroom, allegedly acted alone, and his motive is still unknown. Chancellor Stocker described the incident as a national tragedy, an act of unimaginable violence, and a dark day for the Alpine country.
Im Rahmen einer dreitägigen Staatstrauer wird ganz Österreich der Opfer dieser Tragödie gedenken. Die österreichische Flagge wird auf allen öffentlichen Gebäuden auf Halbmast gesetzt und morgen Vormittag um 10 Uhr wird eine landesweite Trauerminute im stillen Gedenken für die Opfer dieser schrecklichen Tat abgehalten werden. Dieser heutige Tag ist ein dunkler Tag in der Geschichte unseres Landes. Der Amoklauf an einer Schule hier in Graz, dem Borg 3 Schützengasse, ist eine nationale Tragödie, die uns zutiefst erschüttert. Durch diese unfassbare Tat wurden 9 Menschen plötzlich aus ihrem Leben gerissen. Es gibt keine Worte, um den Schmerz, die Fassungslosigkeit und die Trauer auszudrücken, die ganz Österreich empfinden.
We'll move over to the war in Ukraine, where Russia launched large-scale drone attacks on Ukraine early on Tuesday, targeting Kyiv and the southern port city of Odesa. Ukrainian officials reported that a 59-year-old man was killed in Odesa, where residential buildings were struck and at least 4 others were injured. A maternity hospital was also damaged in the assault, intensifying concerns over civilian safety. The attacks come amid ongoing hostilities, with Ukraine continuing to strike targets within Russian territory. Weekend peace talks failed to produce meaningful progress toward ending the 3-year conflict, aside from a limited prisoner exchange agreement. Russia has dismissed calls for an unconditional ceasefire, while Ukrainian officials are urging stronger international sanctions and increased military support to counter the sustained aggression. Meanwhile, the European Union has proposed lowering the price cap on Russian oil from $60 to $45 per barrel, aiming to intensify pressure over its ongoing invasion of Ukraine. The new sanctions are a move intended to significantly reduce Russia's oil revenues. Additionally, the EU plans to ban transactions involving the Nord Stream gas pipelines and impose restriction on 22 Russian banks. These are part of a broader effort to curb Russia's financial resources and compel a ceasefire. The proposal will be discussed at the upcoming G7 summit in Canada, with the EU seeking alignment with its allies.
Very clear. This war must end. We need a real ceasefire, and Russia has to come to the negotiating table with a serious proposal. As it is up to today not showing willingness to achieve peace, we will step up pressure on Russia, including through further robust sanctions. Oil exports still represent 1/3 of Russia's government revenues. We need to cut this source of revenues. The oil price cap is a G7 coalition measure, so we will discuss at G7 in Canada at the end of this week or beginning of next week how to act together. On top of the 342 vessels already listed, we list today additional 77 vessels that are part of the Russian shadow fleet. These vessels are a means to evade sanctions. With our listings, we severely constrain Russia's options to export its oil through a shadow fleet.
France's Senate has approved a law which aims at regulating fast fashion in the country. Senators in the upper house of the French parliament voted almost unanimously for a modified version of a bill passed by France's lower house last year, which also aims to reduce the environmental impact of the textile industry. The bill is targeted at Chinese-founded e-commerce giant Shein, which has a reputation for selling low-quality clothes at a very low price. Easy-to-order and replace fast fashion items are exported to France on a large scale, causing pollution and saturating markets. If implemented, the law would ban advertising by fast-growing Chinese e-commerce platforms like Shein and Temu. And Poland's outgoing president, Andrzej Duda, met with Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim in Putrajaya during a 3-day visit. That's an official visit aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. The visit marks an important diplomatic engagement as Poland seeks to enhance cooperation with Southeast Asian nations, particularly in trade, education, and defense. Both leaders discussed regional security, economic collaboration, and opportunities for investment. They emphasized the importance of expanding partnerships in technology and energy, aligning with shared interest in innovation and sustainable development. The meeting reflects a mutual commitment to deepening relations amid evolving global challenges. President Duda's visit is expected to pave the way for future high-level engagements, reinforcing diplomatic connections between Poland and Malaysia, and he concludes his term, or rather as he concludes his term in office. Argentine President Javier Milei has reaffirmed his nation's steadfast support for Israel during a visit to Jerusalem. During the meeting with Israeli Prime Minister, or rather President, Isaac Herzog, Milei expressed solidarity with Israel, stating that Buenos Aires would stand firmly with Tel Aviv, refusing to yield to criticism stemming from what he described as cowardice or support for unacceptable actions. President Milei's visit also includes discussions on enhancing bilateral relations and cooperation between the two nations.
Demandando la devolución incondicional de los 4 argentinos aún en cautiverio. Están Orón, Ariel y David Cuño y Lior Riudaf, y de la totalidad de los secuestrados en poder de la organización terrorista Hamas. Queremos como nación estar firmes junto a ustedes mientras atraviesan estos días oscuros. No nos doblegaremos ante la crítica fruto de la cobardía o directamente la complicidad con la barbarie.
האיום האיראני הזה, איום על האנושות כולה, עלינו לעמוד יחד, נחושים ותקיפים, כנגד הטרור, כנגד השנאה, כנגד האנטישמיות, כנגד תוכנית הגרעין האיראנית. ישראל לא יכולה לסבול איראן גרעינית. בעלות בריתנו לא יכולות לסבול איראן גרעינית. העולם כולו לא יכול לסבול איראן גרעינית.
And in sports, Japan and South Korea wrapped up their World Cup qualifying campaigns in dominant fashion. Japan crushed Indonesia 6-0 in Osaka, with Crystal Palace Dachi Kamada scoring twice in the first half. The victory secured Japan's spot as Group C winners. Meanwhile, South Korea beat Kuwait 4-0 in Seoul, with PSG's Lee Kang-in among the goal scorers. Tottenham's Son Heung-min made a late appearance as a substitute. Japan coach Hajime Yoriyasu has set the ambitious goal of winning next year's World Cup in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And that's all on Beyond the Continent this evening. Now, do remember, you may send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number displayed on your screens now. And do follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You may also watch us live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times 274, Evo TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.